right along. We're going to segue into our venture, angel, and dealmaker panel. And I would like to welcome up the panelists. I'd like to start with Brian Wong, who is an internet executive and angel investor with 16 years of experience, management and operations experience in e-commerce and media in Greater China, as well as the region and U.S. and Europe. He presently manages his own angel investments through Seacliff Partners, focusing on e-commerce, digital media, and consumer-focused startups in the Greater China region. Brian also is a member of the AngelVest Group. Most recently, he served as CEO of Alive.cn, an online network that connects celebrities and sponsors. And before that, he was a VP of Global Supplier Development at Alibaba. He's held a number of roles at Alibaba. And I think he was, number 51 employee at Alibaba?
Yep.
52 employee at Alibaba. This is Brian here. Next, I'd like to welcome Henry Wong to the stage. Henry is a venture partner at Palo Alto-based Garage Technology Ventures, where he is shaping the firm's Asia investment strategy. He has advised Garage since 2002, while also running a China-focused fund, Diamond Tech Ventures. He also has been a venture partner at Crystal Ventures, where he worked with such companies as SMIC and LGC Wireless. During his career in the networking and communications industry, Henry was CEO and founder of S8 Networks. So Henry, thank you. Next, James Mi. James Mi is co-founder and managing director of Lightspeed China Partners, a China-focused early-stage venture capital firm with investments in internet, mobile, services, and information technology. Previously, James was managing director with Silicon Valley headquartered Lightspeed Venture Partners, and he started the firm's Beijing office in 2008. James was also, in his prior career life, the director of corporate development for Google, responsible for strategic investments in M&A in the Greater China and Pan-Asian region, and leading investments in Chinese internet companies, Baidu, Jiangping, and Xunli. He's also served as head of Asia products at Google, spearheading Google's early China efforts as chief representative in China. So James, thank you for being here. Next, Jeffrey Chi. Jeffrey is vice chairman investments at Vickers Capital Group, a managing director and a member of the firm's investment committee based in Shanghai. He oversees investments in China, sits on the boards of Cambridge Real Estate, Mobinex, and California University of Technology. His experience spans a variety of industries, including information technology, healthcare, and media. Formerly a corporate finance specialist and executive director at Pegasus Capital, Dr. Chi has managed engagements for large and small clients in both public and private sectors. Prior to Pegasus Capital, he was a senior consultant with the Monitor Group, a strategy consulting firm co-founded by business guru Michael Porter. And finally, last but not least, Giudio Zarrella is clients and innovation partner, KPMG, and his 20-plus year career in advisory spans business and IT strategy, including finance, transformation, organization reviews, and offshoring. Edge is committed to proactive thought leadership and is a trusted advisor of many regional and global companies. He drives the client account management program across risk consulting and management consulting in China, developing and leading businesses initiatives and innovative solutions for clients. So there you have it, our all-star panel, dealmaker panel. So let's give them a... All right. And I get to moderate this. I'd like to start off with a very general question that should help us set the stage. Talking about China tech innovation and where it's going. I think we started with the copycat era of everything being copied from U.S. business models that were successful in the U.S. and bringing them to China. And those were the early days, the first wave, with Dang Dang and Ren Ren and EachNet and companies such as these. But today we've really progressed very rapidly, and I think we're starting to see some real innovation, if not micro-innovation, coming from China. And I'd like to hear the panelists' views on where they see this trend going? Is China really, becoming a tech economy? Can China innovate in its own way for its own market? Edge, I'd like to start with you because I know you have some strong views on this.
So mic on, guys? Okay. Actually, Rebecca's just helped us, and I don't usually do this, but I will do it. We've got our tech innovation report that just got released about 3 or 4 weeks ago, which Rebecca helped write. And if I can put in context, about 800 plus executives worldwide we asked the same question and said, where do you see innovation coming from in the future in the world? You can guess what they may have said. US, yes, we agree. Number 2, very fast following was China. Unfortunately, anyone from India, a little bit further behind. But US and China. Next 5 years, where do they believe the innovation is going to come from? It's going to swap, China. So the executives are saying it's China. 10 years after that, it's China. I've just done a roadshow. We were just in Beijing and Shanghai, and do I believe it? You see guys like David, and I love what David said. And you probably heard how many mobile phones do we have and mobile devices do we have here in Hong Kong? 4 to 5 devices. How many do you think are in Beijing? And we did a study right down to this level. How many do you think are in Beijing and Shanghai? Come on, we're going to make you work tonight.
Thank you.
Huh? Thank you very much. In Beijing, 7 to 8 devices, 6 to 7 in Shanghai. We went to city level. In London and New York, 1 to 2. And by the way, when we get to Germany, it's 0.8. They share. Okay? Now, the reason I'm saying that is just a recent study that we did is that there's a long, strong belief, and we're going to see it more, and I'm actually a very strong believer that there's more and more coming from this side of the world. I was recently in Germany, asked the same question as Rebecca just asked. Where do we think the innovation's coming from? I actually think we're going to get to a point on mobile, and the other one that we see is cloud, that China doesn't need to learn from the rest of the world. Most of the innovation is actually going to happen here. I've actually bring a lot of my financial services clients to actually see the innovation going on with the financial institutions here in China on the mobile apps. There's a lot of mobile apps now being developed in China. So using those examples and even our report, I actually think there's a very strong future. But you've got to help guys like David. They're really wanting help from the angel investor and everybody else because they do need help. Because I think this is quite an exciting market.
So is it China innovation for China?
Yeah, I actually think there is. I think if you look in the mobile side, you're going to see more and more, and you mentioned a number of names, more and more that the domestic market is going to drive that innovation. And I know you're right about a little bit of the copying, but I do truly believe that for this market, and I mean the Chinese market and the greater China market, that you're going to see more and more and the consumers driving that desire to have more innovative products. And I think you're going to see stuff that the Chinese are going to develop, which I think the US and Europe will come and want to learn from. I think you're going to see that very much in the mobile side.
Yeah, Jeff or Henry?
Yeah, I agree with Edge to a certain extent. I still believe that it's location oriented. What other mobile technologies, obviously, even when I'm here, I use 3 phones, one China, one Hong Kong, and one US. So I'm using 3 phones, and most of the people here got more than 2 phones, and it's 115% mobile devices population is normal. But I still believe that Silicon Valley is the mecca of high tech, and that's where some of the technologies are invented, especially in the backbone technologies, or maybe in some of the even consumer electronics. There will be continuous match between China and US. Yeah. It's going to be exciting.
Yeah, Brian?
Well, I'd like to sort of go back to a real old adage, which is necessity is the mother of innovation. And I think that what we've seen, based on my experience, China has definitely evolved from copycat to, some would say, process innovation, frugal innovation. You're hearing a lot out of China and India. But the truth of the matter is, what is needed in China exist in Silicon Valley. It might not exist in the developed markets, so the Chinese or the Indians have to create it themselves. And then what you're seeing is actually the Chinese innovations that are created, whether it's Alibaba or other companies like that, very applicable to emerging markets, which needed these things but didn't create them. And so when you talk about innovation sort of coming out of China or places like India, perhaps what will happen is in the next phase, necessity drives innovation in China, but then it's very appropriate in Vietnam. It's very appropriate in even Eastern Europe, because companies needed these things or individuals liked to use these things. And so I definitely agree with your findings, Edge, in terms of the trends. I think that the driver, though, is really necessity. And as these markets become more sophisticated, they can create more. And then globally, you see it already happening with Weixing. Weixing with the talk to function actually is very useful. Some people actually can't write, so they actually rely on voice. And that's applicable to many emerging markets. And also, they've innovated on the fringe in terms of technology to make it much more effective. So.
Okay, if I can just quickly jump in where Henry said, again,
If you take the innovation, and I think China's going to show way. Look at the now, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, everybody would have seen on the Financial Times the Chinese government allowing to open up the financial services market. So you have players like Tencent, Alibaba potentially moving into banking. I know our good friends at Google, at Amazon. I was with Amazon on stage in Beijing yesterday. Everybody's very much looking into what China's going to do in that financial services market. So it's not just in technology, it's spilling over into other sectors. And going to Henry's point, I think the US and China learning a lot from each other because they're actually going to be driving almost very, very similar things and where they want to go in the future.
I observe another trend is that China is actually buying into US like Snapshot, right?
Yeah,
All the
I
bad.
was getting to that, Henry.
Very good. I'll let
You're
you have
jumping
it.
ahead.
Okay, go for it.
James, your view?
You gotta turn it on. What China, we are saying, I agree, the mobile is a big space for innovation. And also, I think given the population density, and given the traditional industry in China is still very young compared with US and Europe, leveraging internet to transform these traditional industry, you just don't have that opportunity in US. But you do have that in China. So that's another way of innovation that you see a lot of them in online to offline model that's working very well in China.
Jeff, did you have
Sure.
anything? you wanna add?
I think I agree with everyone, what everyone's saying here, and I think, from a viewpoint of where we're going to start seeing innovation, I think increasingly so, you're going to see a lot coming, more and more coming out of China. On several different layers, I think the landscape might be a little different. I feel that the U.S. is probably going to continue to lead in terms of basic fundamental research. I don't see the Chinese as spending too much on a lot of that core and basic research and invention. So that I think is an area, and that I think is very important for the long term. And in the long term, China will probably need to catch up. In the midterm, what we're beginning to see already, and I think, in the last 2 years running, the number of patents filed from large Chinese corporates, Huawei in particular, has large surpassed of their American, European counterparts. Mm. So that is indication that intellectual property is becoming more important. People are spending more attention to that, and because Chinese firms are beginning to get hurt when they don't take care of their intellectual property, the protection laws for Chinese firms and for international firms operating in China are going to become more established and therefore beneficial to innovation. China has a fundamental advantage in terms of innovating. James pointed to one of them, and that is the sheer mass and the sheer population. If there's 1% adoption of anything, that's a lot of people, and that's enough to keep a business and to sustain a business. So that is one fundamental advantage. The other advantage is China's a little bit of a protectionist society. The reason why Baidu, not the only reason, one of the reasons why Baidu, Tencent, and Alibaba have become such large giants with very little competition from American counterparts or American equivalents is because the markets have pretty much been shut against them, and that gives them a fundamental advantage to innovate at the early stage and to grow in popularity and to gain mass before they are facing competition elsewhere. And you're beginning to see in Southeast Asia in particular that a lot of these Chinese firms are now competing head to head with the American counterparts.
Yeah.
And that actually takes us to the point that Henry was heading us toward about the Chinese outbound story. These tech giants from China that are beginning to acquire startups and really make their presence known globally. Where do you think this trend is going?
It continues. It's wonderful to see China company coming in,
Yes.
paying big bucks for American companies, and at the same time, I make it and facilitate that, even make it easier. Is I bring good American companies to grow in Asia Pacific, and help them to start up the R&D office here and subcontract out. I think that's a step towards the right direction. Yeah, not only do I cut costs, leverage the economics, and I also help the company to have a chance to grow towards a market that is huge. So that's what our fund is doing right now.
Do these Chinese companies have a disadvantage in Western markets, or how are they regarded? Yeah, Brian?
Well, I think you have to separate the world into different segments because there's the Western markets, there's the emerging markets.
Yeah.
I think the Chinese companies probably have a better chance at first entering emerging markets where, like I said earlier, user habits are more similar or the users are more forgiving. My interpretation of what's happening in terms of Chinese companies going to the United States is largely first to learn. A lot of these guys are taking minority stake in the companies, maybe taking an observer board seat, and then understanding what the market characteristics are like, maybe learning a little bit about the technology, and then figuring out what aspects of that can be used maybe back home. And then you see, of course, in other cases where they'll acquire companies, and I think particularly in the gaming sector, it's much easier to sort of transpose some of those aspects of the business across markets where it requires less customization or modification of those products. But I think that when you get to the United States, that's kind of like prime time, and you have to be ready to really, show your best.
James, I know you were at Google in China in the early days, and I saw you nodding your head when you was talking about how it's really tough for the American companies to get in and compete against these giants today. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think definitely for multiple reasons. Certainly, there are different roadblocks being created along the way. But also, I think another challenge is for U.S. companies, and typically they have the mentality that we are successful in U.S. and Europe. Our recipe could be duplicated, and typically could be duplicated in other emerging markets. But China is just regulatory barriers and local competition and user behaviors are quite different. If you centralize the decision making in the headquarters, it's very difficult. So I joined Google in 2003, 10 years ago, and the first week I need to present a 5-year plan for China. They really learned that.
It's always a 5-year plan.
That's right. That's right. So I have 0 engineer, 0 salespeople, and so all the different efforts we have to make, and certainly the biggest task I need to figure out to do is move the servers from the U.S. to China, right? And then you have to figure out the license, the legal structures, and censorship, right? And clearly Eric Schmidt said we should do it, and Larry Sugar said absolutely no way we can do that, right? So it took a while for them to really see the true China is and what it means that if you really don't have a presence here. But eventually the decision is still very much centralized. And that makes it just hard for the U.S. companies. But I think that really speaks about the Chinese companies' opportunities. And they are learning from that. And I think the investment you are seeing, Tencent, they are making, is they really understand that they need to be close to the innovation. Mm-hmm. That's why they are making investment in funds, they are making investment in early stage, and so they can learn the secret sauce, not just by reading the blogs. So that's what they're doing, because the world is getting more flat, and more and more the business is becoming global.
Brian, from your perspective at Alibaba for almost a decade, are these China internet giants, are they ready to go global, or can they really compete globally?
Well, I was actually speaking to James about this, the difference in the China, I guess they call them BAT now.
Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent.
Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent. Very different cultures. Working with Jack, it's very much it almost feels like a family business because it's the very close relationships. Jack looks to the people, the character of the people, the their loyalty or their belief in the vision, and then he places them. And whereas Tencent is much more sort of, I'd say, they hire a lot of professional managers that come in for their skills and for their background, and so I think that it's a different sort of assessment for the companies, the Chinese companies that go out there, and as they're going out though, in terms of the globalization aspect, I think that, like we were saying, it's really to kind of acquire that knowledge and understand the marketplaces that they want to enter. Yeah.
So this is still really early days for this phenomenon then, this trend.
I think it's accelerating. I think that they're learning much faster, and I think that even a company like, all three of them, you're seeing a lot of activity in Silicon Valley, as they were mentioning, because I think the sophistication is much more, it's much higher now in terms of their ability to go abroad. Yeah.
So I hear a lot of pushback among about these three giants that they're really stifling innovation, stifling the startups in China. That anytime there's a new idea, then these three can just copy it really quickly internally. What do you think about that? Is that a huge issue for China going forward, China innovation going forward?
Go. I was actually going to jump in there. I actually can make the same accusation, be careful what I'm about to do here, about some even US entities or European entities. I mean, having just got back from Beijing and Shanghai, and you see the startup spirit and what people are actually trying to do. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of little startups who would love to get bought up by Baidu and Tencent and follow. I mean, that's no different to what you see in Silicon Valley. People want to get bought out if they, but some of them, and you heard David, I mean, they've got grand ambitions. I mean, I think you just have to be careful, if I can say this, the press side of it. There is a lot of innovation going on and a lot of great startups who want to do the right thing. And I'm going to just take on a point from Henry, because I'm going to challenge just a little bit of Jeffrey. Where do you think the most R&D centers have been set up in the world? These are big US corporates. They're actually all setting up in China. And I think out of these R&D centers, and there's more R&D centers now being set up in China than anywhere else on the planet, it's going to be guys like David who are going to come out of Morgan Stanley's, who are going to set up their company and wanting to do great things. I think that's just a very typical accusation that happens when there's 3 or 4 big players. But that's very much in any mature market as well. You've got the same issue, and I know the accusation's been said about Google, Oracle in the past, the Amazons. You get the same accusations. So,
yeah, and I think it was a mentality of the BAT companies that if there's a good startup coming up, they said, "Oh, I can build a team and create something and compete and kill." But as the company's getting bigger, and also particularly, I think the event Qihoo, the rise of Qihoo, the founder of Qihoo, Zhou Hongyi, he's a fighter.
Yeah.
He fights with Baidu, he fights with Alibaba, he fights with Tencent, he fights with everyone.
And he's going to fight with Google.
And then the market cap of the company now is 10 billion.
Yeah.
So that creates a tremendous pressure on all three big guys because they need to protect their turf. So whenever there's a new model comes up, they typically won't be able to put the best people to work on something different. And you can look at China. It's one IPO, right? And it's a search for travel. And certainly Baidu can do that. But the Baidu answer, actually, Wang Mengqiu, she runs all the search and before. Basically, she said, I don't have the bandwidth to manage another team. This team already China has gone to different funding, now have 500 people. And it's much better to buy them. Because if you don't buy them, you try to build it, you're already a few years behind. And your competitor will buy it. That creates even more trouble for them. So I haven't seen any acquisition from Baidu for more than 70 million, maybe 3 years ago. Suddenly they're writing checks for 300 million for China and 1.9 billion for 91, which is just an app market. So I think that trend, it will continue because they are sitting on billions of cash, generating pretty low yield. And it's a problem consistently you see in the Valley. That Google is buying all these companies. The secret sauce is how do you integrate them?
Yeah.
If you can do it well, that can really help you to grow the business.
Silicon Valley is the best research and development office for anybody who want to grow fast.
Yeah.
If you want to copy, it takes time to copy, it takes manpower to copy,
Yep.
and the end result may not work. Why don't you just allocate a lump sum, buy something that absolutely will work, buy the best of breed,
Yep.
and then let it grow.
Yep.
And you have the market dominance and control, and that's everything.
We're beginning to see in some of our companies on that front, and this is sort of the outbound story and sort of the competing in the global industry, global economy story, that Chinese firms recognizing that perhaps even though they're more expensive, that there is better talent in the U.S., have set up R&D centers in the U.S. just to be able to tap that talent and to hire engineers there. Not so much of a marketing trying to get the market, but recognizing that
Certain skills.
we need certain skills. If we want to create a world-class product, we need world-class engineers. We need to hire the best people we can find.
That doesn't sound very encouraging for China's move up the ladder, the tech ladder, actually.
Well, no, but it goes back to Henry's point, and that's why I thought he said that so well at the beginning of the conversation, is that you're going to get two countries working together
Right.
to drive that innovation. I mean, this belief that it's always got to be the US, I think this is a great thing that China, and guys here, I thought Silicon Valley actually drives a lot of the innovation that China wants to follow. So I think the two countries being almost a symbiotic relationship between each other is actually a very positive thing. So
We just saw 58.com go public in New York and also Chunar go public in New York, and both did pretty well. Do you think that this is going to lead to a resurge of IPOs from China after the death valley of the last 2 years?
I was speaking with an investment banker, Silicon Valley-based investment banker, just about 3 weeks ago, and we had an early morning breakfast just before he headed to the airport. I just got off a plane, and he was saying, Jeff, it feels like 2006 all over again. This China and 58 are just the tip of the iceberg. There are a lot of deals. There were a lot of deals in the pipeline before we hit this dry season, and all those companies are now bigger, more revenues, more profitable than they ever were. So I think in the months to come we will see quite a few more. Obviously, the big one to watch is Alibaba.
yeah.
Is it going to go public in London?
Oh, that's anyone's guess. I think everyone here has.
Or is Jack Ma going to get his way in Hong Kong?
I think it'll be likely Hong Kong.
Place your bets.
That's a good idea.
Anyone from the Hong Kong Monetary Authority here?
You got Hong Kong Invest.
So some people argue that the venture capital model is broken, that the returns are just not there and are not going to be there, and it's really a survival of the fittest time now for venture capital firms. You also now have a new wave of angel investors coming in that are having a huge impact, and crowdfunding as well. So do you think that the venture capital model was broken, and if not, why not? Or why?
I think in the U.S. there's potentially an oversupply of capital, and also the development costs for startups have been reduced significantly given the crowd infrastructure. In China, I think there's a lot of a fund being raised for renminbi denominated funds, and they are investing in traditional growth industry, and that's seeing some headwinds because the macro economy is slowing down. But tech-related startups, I think it's more about focusing on the quality deals, and it's not about the number of deals you do, and we think that China is still in the early innings because we're talking about IPOs, right? And the ecosystem basically is more people seeing the success for startups to IPOs, right? And the Chinese people tend to be more risk averse. In Silicon Valley, the top talents, they want to do startups, right? And China just takes few iterations, and there are more and more people willing to take that risk. And we think the biggest constraint is talents on founder side and the talents on the professional management.
Yeah.
And as you have, the pool is getting bigger, and I think this just builds a bigger ecosystem. So I don't think there's the problem is that venture model is not working. I think it's working very well, and you see the success of China, and all these are venture funded. But I think the renminbi denominated fund, that kind of investment kind of have a tailwind behind their back, and on the macro growth industry, that's a little bit challenging right now.
Brian?
Well, if I could comment, I think the angel sort of phenomenon is actually a positive thing for the venture industry because it just creates more opportunity within the ecosystem, and I think they're quite synergistic. So what you're seeing now is a lot of these entrepreneurs or early employees of the early sort of internet companies out of China are leaving the company, starting their own businesses, but also investing in businesses, especially, there are these networks that are being created, the alumni from the different, big Chinese internet companies that still work very closely together. I think that's all very positive for the industry.
Let's open it up for some Q&A with the audience. Anybody have a question? Yes, here, and if you wouldn't mind, let's get a mic to him. Where's our roving mic?
Oh, that's
a roving mic.
The roving mic. Okay. All right, and would you please identify yourself?
No worries. Guido Schenk with Dow Jones. I'd like to challenge a little bit the panel's excitement on China, innovation, and entrepreneurship for the simple reason, immigration. Like, one of the things which makes the Valley great is this drive of talented people from around the world, also China, to set up great companies. I have not seen many people from outside of China who dream of setting up a company in Beijing.
Ooh.
What is your opinion?
Yeah.
Ooh. Can I just quickly jump in? You may have heard of Glamour Sales. Everybody know Glamour Sales? It sells luxury brands in China. It's 4 years a company. We've got a big event here tomorrow, which I'm chairing. The CEO, Thibaut Villet, is set up. He's a Frenchman, as you can say it by his name, but he has and been, I think, 17 years in China and set up in China and has a whole Chinese team. But he came here to set up in China because he saw that as a key market. And a number of guys that our firms work with, and we are other startups. People want to come actually here. There's my good friend Fred right there now, here in Hong Kong, who set up a startup here. And by the way, many French are actually coming to China because there's not many opportunities in France coming to China.
And Australians too, right?
And Australia. Oh yeah, no, we don't live in Australia anymore. But the thing is that they've actually coming up. And do people do it? Yeah, I was actually with another fashion, and just because it was fashion in Beijing, but guys who are actually coming to China. And again, James is right. There's all the rules and everything else, but they work their way through it. You have to wait. You got to have patience. I think it was Richard who said it very, very well. When you come to China, there's a lot about patience, understanding the rules, knowing the right people, the right investors to help you. But there are folks who are doing it. I was in Germany, and people all want to come to China because they see it as an opportunity. I think you're going to see more of that, a lot more. Yeah, correct.
Some of the groups that are moving over under this immigration question, some of them are sort of fashion companies and
that's
sort of
right.
easier to set up type companies versus some of the higher tech, sort of later stage.
That's actually a good point. You're actually getting it more if it's in a particular sector. For example, financial services and the payment side, you see a lot of guys coming over either from the US or Europe coming in to set up startups. But again, because they're bringing a certain business skill to the table. I mean, that's the excitement of it all.
Another question, please?
No, James was going to say something.
Oh, I totally agree. I think the Silicon Valley's strengths, right, and the people from all over the different countries are very motivated to make it. And I think that China definitely has some problems. For example, to do a startup, you have to go through so many registration process, right, and it's much more difficult. And the rental cost, when we did some calculation, actually it's getting close to Silicon Valley rental cost. And salary for engineers is about 1/3. And you are talking about 3-year experience, right? And but I think the country and the talents and the vast majority of the market is still, I think the government is trying to do that. The new regulation is saying you need to really simplify the process for a company to start. And I think they're making some efforts.
I think Hong Kong has some views on this as well, but we're going to get to that in a minute.
But actually, on that point, Guido, I don't think talent and migration is really the most serious issue. I think there are issues, and every economy faces a brain drain issue. I think more challenging in the shorter term is intellectual property protection.
Yeah,
I think
correct.
we are
That is the
improving.
issue.
And back to the people issue, China has a lot of engineers, and a lot of the innovation. You only need a few bright brains to come up with the idea. Those are relatively easy to train, and so I don't see the presence of talent or the lack of it as going to be an issue. But once the idea is formed, how does it nurture? Does it get protected? That I think is the key issue. Yeah. And that is, I think, being fixed at the moment. I think as Chinese firms are beginning to file more patents, as they begin to see the importance of intellectual property protection to help them compete in a global industry, global economy, that will become more and more important.
Yes, question from this side of the room.
Actually, Rebecca,
yes.
I've also
Scott?
got a quick question as well.
Oh, okay, Anson.
E-commerce. We've heard a lot about mobile and mobile apps and some really interesting things from our award winners. But e-commerce, earlier this week, in case people didn't notice, 11/11, Singles Day in mainland China, absolutely smashed all records. $3 billion in sales in 30 minutes.
Oh, in 30 minutes.
In 30 minutes. 3 billion in 30 minutes. Edge and I we were in Beijing and in Shanghai talking to a number of the e-commerce players.
And the key point here is 35 billion
35 billion in
by one entity in 24 hours.
24 hours. 35 billion.
Billion renminbi.
So e-commerce looks as though that could be potentially a great opportunity across China. But I'd be interested to get Brian's views and James and Henry's.
Okay. Well, I think it's pretty apparent e-commerce is real, and it's at a scale that we've never seen in the world. I mean, the fact that this is the largest day of e-commerce sales in the world is just mind-blowing. We never would expect this.
It's amazing the amount of press that got, too.
Yeah. Well,
The Alibaba PR machine.
it work at work.
At work.
But what's also interesting is other players are playing into that. So it's become a national sort of event, and other players like 360 Buy, Suning, et cetera, are making this into an occasion. But I think what's really fascinating about e-commerce, we hear a lot about first-tier cities or second-tier cities and how everybody's buying the latest sort of fashion and all these things through the internet. But there's actually something very interesting happening in the rural areas. I don't know if people have heard of this phenomenon called the Taobao City. It's about 14 of these, and I went and visited some of them. These are actual farming communities that have created new industries because of e-commerce. And there's this one village in particular I went to called Jiaxing in Jiangsu province. They had a net outflow of young people. A lot of people leave the villages to go work in the big cities. So they had this population drain. They also were facing some serious problems because they had moved from farming to agricultural farming to pig farming to plastics, and that was polluting the environment. They didn't know what to do with this community. It was a dying community. 4 young people came back from the city after getting education. They worked at China Telecom. They said, let's start up a e-commerce site on Taobao. They're actually very smart. They looked at the demand in terms of what are the products that are most people are interested in. It was actually furniture. DIY furniture is one of the top ones. They didn't have any history in making furniture in this village, but they decided to do it. Today, that village now has 1,400 Taobao shops. The population outflow stopped, and then it actually now is a net inflow because people actually go there to work. And the revenue generated is 800 million RMB a year. And that's just an amazing phenomenon that's happening in the rural areas because of e-commerce. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it's happening across the board, and I think it's an amazing thing. And everybody knows that, say, Taobao alone generates about 60% of all the postal packages in China Post. So this is a massive scale.
I want to move the question over here to Scott Thoreau.
Rebecca, I was in London last week and heard an interesting presentation on demographics. This was given to some of the top ad agencies and clients. And the person who presented does a lot of work with the Chinese government. And I'd like to get the panelists' views on how important looking at the demographics, not now, but 5, 10 years out, especially the companies that you invest in on the consumer end, how, looking at that segment in China. And he was saying that really the age group between 40 to 65 is where you want to be. And it's in China, and it's not India, it's not anywhere else. So I'd just like to turn that over to the panel.
There's several interesting thing about the demographics, and I think it could also segue into the e-commerce question. I think, as VCs, we like e-commerce. It's very focused. It's an easy way to identify companies to try and get some fancy returns. But I think overall we're missing the big picture a little bit. E-commerce is still only 10% of retail in China, right? So it is actually a large market. I mean, I remember when I was in business school, one of my professors told me, in China, if you ever do work in China, be a little careful about this China mathematics. If I've got 1.5 billion people and I get 1% of the market, that's a lot of people. Well, sitting where I'm sitting right now, it actually works. So, yeah. The other thing I think with the demographics, something that is of concern in the medium term is it's an aging population, and because of the single child policy, we're going to start seeing a declining workforce. If the government doesn't do anything in the next 10 years, we're going to see a declining workforce within the next 2 decades. And that is going to hurt the economy more, and the government recognizes it. They're figuring out what to do. The only problem is they can't really reverse it because they've taken such a political hard stand on the single child policy before. So it's a little bit of face issue, typical Chinese fashion. How do we set the stage for us to try and work our way out of this predicament?
Okay.
That is something to watch out for.
Okay. Let's pick up one more question. Spanning. Okay. Yes.
So quick introduction, I guess. I'm Taryn. Dr. Smith is fine as well. I'm based in Shanghai, and we're currently raising our first fund. It's a joint fund between the U.S. and China, for all the reasons you guys have mentioned. Innovation happening on both sides and sort of taking on big municipal, big provincial problems, because our LPs in China are actually the provincial level and municipal level governments. So my question to you is sort of, what are you seeing on the later stage in terms of getting away from some of the early stage groups in the e-commerce and the mobile apps, but what are you seeing on the later stage as far as the more sophisticated technology, some bigger problem-solving groups?
Well, I think they're definitely.
This is kind of an early stage panel, but
yeah, but I think
the hesitation there.
We think there's a lot of competition for the later stage, really breakout companies, and we actually see competition even trickle down to B round. That if there's a company really have established model, great team, initial growth, and valuation typically go north 100 million sometimes. And I think the stock market, given what it is today, probably won't help. But I think that comes in cycles. And usually the better way is you get to know these companies early stage. And even you don't invest at that time, you get to know the founders and try to be helpful to them. And usually that helps to get into the later stage. And I would say more and more these companies are available for later stage investment too.
Okay. Any last question? Okay. Yes, right here next to Anson.
Hi, my name's Thomas Chow. You guys mentioned many sectors that have been sort of successful before right now. I would like to get each of yours view about any emerging new trends or something that we haven't discussed that will be exciting for the next 2-3 years.
Just really quickly down the line.
We like online to offline, leveraging internet to transform the traditional sectors. We like internet-based financial services, and we like the Internet of Things. We have invested a company called Nest in US, and we see a lot more leveraging the supply chain and the manufacturing capabilities in China, but coupled with the internet capabilities.
Henry?
I think consumer is going to be a very hot sector. Anything behind the cashier right now is fully managed and scientifically managed by Salesforce.com and Larry Ellison and his Oracle, all kinds of software behind the cashier. But in front of the cashier is wide open. So it's for your imagination to conquer.
Well, we're at an interesting point in the market right now. I think we're coming off this mobile internet wave, and there were a lot of companies in the mobile internet wave, and we're in this phase where I think there's no significant trend. I think it's actually a very healthy stage to be in. So I'd invest in any business that makes sense. Right, and there's there's no because off the mobile internet wave, and then there was a mobile gaming wave. There was just too much competition. Valuations are much higher than they ought to be, and all that. So it wasn't healthy, and I think this is a healthy phase for the industry right now.
Okay, Edge?
I actually agree with all three, but there's one the report that you helped us write, which blew me away, where people thought about in China. It'd be interesting to get the views. I'm going to go take it right on a tangent. Is artificial intelligence and all this precog and cognitive sort of technology and data analytics, and they're all actually referring, these 800 execs are all saying that China is going to drive it because of mathematics, engineering, and this whole consumer and mobile. It actually gives you more and more analytics. And how are you going to use it? And that one there threw me a bit when everyone thought that China was going to be leading the way. And this is this, I think, new wave, not next 2 to 3 years, but next 5 to 10 years. It's something to watch very, very carefully. I don't know many good companies yet, but it's something that I think is going to be quite exciting.
Brian?
Okay. Areas that I look at for angel investments is still e-commerce and supply chain, just because I'm familiar with that, and I think there's still a lot of activity going on that, especially around more specialized areas and functions. The second is really digital media and entertainment, mainly because I think China is moving away from this low-cost sort of export model. They're trying to do consumer-driven type of industries, and media in particular. They call it the cultural assets. They hope to become a pillar within the economy, and I think that there's opportunity, especially on the digital side. And then finally, what I call lifestyle. It's hospitality, travel, and actually food and F&B. There's a lot of issues around food scares, and people actually, I'm surprised at how many venture funds are actually investing in F&B, but I see an opportunity there, and I personally have invested in one of those. And travel, obviously, people are aspirational. They've got money, so they need to spend it somewhere.
That's great. Let's give our venture capital angel investor dealmaker panel a round of applause. And they will be sticking around for more Q&A.
James.
And next up,
Very good. Thank you.